So even though it looks like 1978 right now here at LED Performance, it's actually 2013. But back in 1978, I rode some of these bikes and started building engines for motorcycles in 79, 80, around that time period. And I never really thought back then that in 2013 that we'd still be developing products for these old motorcycles. So even though for the last 10, 15 years most of my work has been four-strokes, the modern ATVs are all high-tech four-stroke engines, and we've done well with that. More and more people are getting interested in vintage racing, and so some vintage riders have brought me their bikes to work on, and I've really been enjoying working on the older motorcycles. You know, we all look back and go, wow, I wish I'd have known then what I know now. And for the last 30 years I've been thinking about some of the motors that I modified back in the 70s and 80s, and think, wow, if I could work on those motors now, I'd sure make them a lot better than I did then. And so now I get to live that over again, and I'm really enjoying that. Most of these old bikes have a lot of port timing. Especially Yamahas from 78 to into the early 80s, the cylinders had a lot of port timing in them. They're real pipey, a little bit hard to ride. We're fixing some of those issues, building motors now that have much better acceleration than they ever had back then. Our approach is, in most cases, on like this 78, this is a perfect example. This is a 78 YZ250, and the 78 YZ250 was always really pipey. I think the reason for that is probably because Yamaha's technology in the motocross department was coming from the road race guys, because the cylinder is ported like a road race motor. Like a 1980 YZ125 has about 200 degrees of exhaust port timing. That's like a TZ125. A YZ250 like this is a 78. It's got a really tall exhaust port. And so our approach to these motors is to make them a lot more rideable, and we end up with a lot more horsepower, a lot wider power band, a lot more rideable, and a lot more acceleration. A motor like this will go in and actually lower the port timings and then improve the transfer port so it scavenges better. We make the engine a lot more efficient, and then we build a pipe for it. We're using a more modern pipe design, of course, than it ever had in 78, and that in conjunction with the port changes make the bike more comparable to a modern engine. These old 250s, they never made 30 horsepower back in the 70s. A YZ250 probably made 26 to 28 horsepower, you know, never more than that in 78. And we're probably we'll make over 40 and still have way more rideable, way more low end than they ever had back in those days. Here's another example of a rare vintage bike that we're working on. This is Jim Anderson's YZ250A, and we've developed an exhaust system for that, made porting changes. This is another example of a machine that has a lot more acceleration, a lot more low end than it ever had stock, and makes around 40 horsepower. We're also developing exhaust systems and porting for the YZ250G and the YZ250H, which is the 80 and 81. And we'll widen the power band, give it a lot more acceleration. This is a prototype of one of our exhaust systems. We're not quite finished with the exhaust system, but we're pretty close, making real progress on that. The same approach again for all of these bikes. Here's a YZ125G, 1980 YZ125, another one of Jim Anderson's collection. We just finished the muffler for that, and we're going to be working on exhaust systems for these as well. We've been doing some cylinder work on them. And this is another engine that had really a revvy motor, not a whole lot down low, but you know, a lot of port timing. And a lot of the guys that are riding these bikes are bigger riders. It's not just, you know, back in 1980, lightweight kids mostly bought them, and now guys like me ride them. And so they're making the machine more rideable, wider power band, better acceleration, is really a big deal. So this working on these old bikes is kind of a labor of love, and it's fun to go back in time and do all these engines. So that's why it looks like it's 1978 at LED Performance.